Welcome to the Dynamics of Everyday Life, where we demystify some tricky concepts and get to know ourselves a little bit better. Welcome back to the Dynamics of Everyday Life. This episode is going out in the week when I have a birthday and the podcast is also a year old. Happy birthday to both of us. So what's this episode going to be about? Let's start off with exploring what Freud thought about birthdays. And interestingly enough, he actually wasn't a great fan of the celebrations, although apparently he didn't mind the gifts. On his 74th birthday, he wrote to his wife Martha, "There was of course no way of evading the nonsense of the birthday." And this has made me think about what birthdays mean to different people, how varied our expectations can be, and how we can navigate them in a way that works well for us. First of all, there's the obvious point about getting older and what this can mean for people. Now, some people embrace this, feeling that with age comes wisdom, and this can be true. As can be that with age comes an irritability with technology and a feeling that you're becoming ever more irrelevant. Something we often say, Shay Rogers, is, "Why do they have to make this so difficult?" And this can refer to all manner of things technological, ranging from finding things on the Sky remote or the Sky system to updating the payment options on the family phone plan. Now, I do have a theory about the world of IT, and that's that it's only made as difficult as it is to keep people in work. I'm sure it really does not need to be as complicated as it is. Maybe, though, it's as Freud described those of us over 50, when he thinks that we're not suitable for analytic treatment. And he talks about the elasticity of the mental processes on which the treatment depends is, as a rule, lacking. Now, much as I love Freud, I do disagree here. Since I've hit 50, I've taken up new activities and I've continued to learn. I might be a bit slower than I was in my 20s, but realistically not much. And as I develop my own business, I continue to learn about social media, how to promote my business, how to network, and what I want my business to look like, not what other people think it should. Age, as we've often heard, is just a number. But as the latest Bridget Jones film highlights, it does bracket us together with some people and separates us from others. A quick side note here, if you do go and see the Bridget Jones film, please take some tissues. It's quite an emotional rollercoaster. Back to what we're talking about. The key for me here is being happy in the age that you are. And if you're not, what is that telling you? Do you think you should have achieved something by now? And if so, says who? As we approach each new year, are we pleased with where we are, or do we feel that we're missing out on something? And this is the point where our defence mechanisms can come out to play, and we can start to tell ourselves all kinds of stories. We can rationalise our choices. Remember, rationalisation is all about giving ourselves justifiable reasons as to why we're not doing something. Well, of course I've not been promoting my business. I've not had the time. I'm so busy baking cakes for the PTA. This is not a phrase you'll ever hear me utter. I can bake a cake. I just choose not to most of the time. Although, a few years ago, I was pretty smug when my daughter and I won the brownie bake-off. I think a few parents didn't think I had it in me. Anyway, I digress. And we do all know by now that I can tangent wildly at a moment's notice. Anyway, back on topic. Birthdays are a good point in time to take a step back and consider if what we're doing is actually working for us. Are we acting defensively in any particular way? Are we stopping ourselves from making the changes that will help us? And giving ourselves good reasons, or at least what we think are good reasons for this? Are we in the same position as we were this time last year? And if we are, is this a conscious choice? If not, are we giving ourselves enough credit for how far we've come? This time last year, my podcast hadn't even been released into the world, and now it's a huge part of my work identity. I'm even rebranding my company under the name of my podcast because it's become so central to who I am and what I do. So we can achieve a huge amount in 12 months, and if it's not at the accepted time of year, such as New Year's Eve, then we tend not to think about it. As I've already mentioned, this can also tie into what we think we should have achieved. The stories that we can create for ourselves can be incredibly dangerous here. There's every possibility that we're playing into someone else's narrative. We've talked before about the unconscious patterns that get laid down during our formative years. And unless we try and uncover the reasons for our behaviour and responses, these are likely to stay unconscious and keep directing us. We've talked about the repetition compulsion before, where we repeat something over and over again, either because it feels familiar and safe to us, or because we're trying to heal a primal wound. We can easily get tied up in knots, thinking that we're making choices for ourselves, when actually we're living someone else's ideals. Some people love a birthday, and some people are actually very uncomfortable with all the attention on them. When we were small, I used to love a birthday party, whereas my brother really isn't that keen. I still remember him when he was small sitting on our grand's knees at one of his birthday parties, whilst everyone else around was having fun. There's no right or wrong here. What's important is that you do what's right for you and not attempt to live up to other people's expectations of your birthday. Significant birthdays, like weddings, can be extra fraught. But we also have expectations of how other people will respond on our birthdays. We can tell ourselves stories if people don't respond how we think they will or should do on our birthday. But remember, people have different ideas about what's important, and what might feel like an essential to you may be just not that important to someone else. And if you get cross about someone not responding on your birthday in the way that you think they should, is it really that you're upset about? Maybe you've displaced your frustration about another aspect of your relationship into someone forgetting or not making much fuss about your birthday. When you think about it, that's a lot easier and much more tangible to get cross about, and can actually feel a lot safer than getting into other areas. My invitation to you this week is to have a think about how you feel about birthdays, both yours and other people's. As a parent, I have to admit that I am so relieved to be past the birthday party stage of parenting. I remember at the time, one of my friends said that birthday parties were the price she paid for having children. And I know what she means by this. The emphasis put on 2 hours of a weekend afternoon often gets started months before the event, and it has been known to cause sleepless nights. And that's even before I've thought about a party bag. So what does a birthday mean to you? Is it something to be celebrated? Something to be feared? Or is it something that just happens? And, as always, give yourself some grace. Age can be a challenging topic for all of us, and sometimes we actively avoid thinking about it. Remember, we have defence mechanisms for a reason, so don't race in and attempt to dismantle them without considering how they might actually be helpful for you. Now, before I launch into my closing words, I want to highlight my new venture. I've talked about it before, but I think it's worth revisiting. As you may know, it's part of my mission to make psychodynamic theory accessible to everyone so that we can all make better choices for ourselves without relying on social media memes or self-proclaimed gurus to help us feel better. So with that in mind, I'm bringing out a new training course. It's called Psychodynamics for Beginners, and it's initially for coaches, but I am going to roll it out to people who aren't coaches, people who just want to learn more. So if you'd like to find out more about this, then please subscribe to my newsletter for further information or book in a time to have a chat with me about it. So, as I always finish, looking at ourselves at this level can be challenging and unnerving as we develop our awareness, so I'd always encourage that you do this at your own speed. If you feel you need some extra help around this, then I've put together a PDF resource sheet and you can find the link for this in the show notes. If you'd like to have a chat with me about psychodynamics or whether I'm the right coach, supervisor or mentor for you, then click on the link that's also in the show notes. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Dynamics of Everyday Life. Please hit the follow button for future episodes and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on Instagram at The Dynamics of Everyday Life or find me on LinkedIn at Julia Rogers. I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on dynamics. The Dynamics of Everyday Life is brought to you by Coaching 42 and the fabulous team at the Podcast Boutique.